Hello, everybody. So, today I thought I'd start off with a confession of sorts. So, occasionally, during New Year's Eve, what I end up doing to bring in the new year is I put on the last part of episode 574. It's the scene where the Straw Hats are about to enter the New World for the very first time and they're being led by a pack of whales. There's a lot of reminiscing during that scene, like each of the Straw Hats is thinking back on their struggles during the time skip. But ultimately, the scene ends with a countdown. So I just timed the episode with a real clock and it goes 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Happy New Year! It's. I got a feeling, guys, that this year's the good one. This is the one where things finally begin to click and people's wishes come true. That's exactly what I said last time, and everything worked out perfect. We get the completed cover spread as well as the cover for Weekly Shonen Jump, 1,000 chapters, the 1,000 Sunny, and we get the characters that were missing from last chapter's color spread, which were Luffy, Jinbei, Nami, and Brook. I actually thought Brook was going to be the skull in the middle of the One Piece logo, but apparently not. And the top that Nami is wearing here is different than the one she was wearing back in chapter 100, but she's still holding a crown above her head, and then Jinbei's holding a dagger because he's been thinking about backstabbing somebody in the crew. The chapter starts off with Luffy on the 5th floor running into Sicilian, because if you remember, after Kaido cut Okiku's arm off, Inuarashi instructed the minks to get out of the roof, and so the minks decided to make themselves useful and take out the beast pirates that were guarding the staircase. And there's a lot of recapping in this chapter, a lot of references to past events, like even from the first page, Luffy highlights how impressed he was back in Zou when he witnessed the loyalty of the minks in refusing to give up Raizo. And at first I really didn't think much of the scene with Sicilian, like to me it was whatever. But then when I combined that scene with the scene that comes later with Luffy and Kinemon, I kind of got the impression that Oda was trying to echo Joy Boy in those scenes. Because if you remember, Joy Boy lived during the Void Century. And we also know that a long, long time ago, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, in fact, the Minks and the Kozuki clan made a pact with each other to become sworn brothers. And then, of course, you also have the fact that both of these clans seem to have some deep, deep connection with the moon. The Minks get their Sulong power-up from staring at the full moon because the moonlight reminds them or awakens their primal instincts and memories. And so, of course, we know that this raid, this invasion of Onigashima, is taking place under the light of a full moon, but I also think it's important to notice that Oda has made it very clear, he's actually made it clear twice already, that the conversation between Yamato and Ace is also happening under a full moon. The name Kozuki has the kanji for both moon and light in it. We know that the 6 founding families of Wano, with the exception of the Kurozumi clan, also have the word moon in their names. And so their history goes back at least 800 years. And since Joy Boy was alive back then, I just can't imagine Joy Boy not having anything to do with the relationship between the Kozuki clan and the Minks. And so I think revealing more about that relationship would mean also revealing more about the importance of the moon. But since Oda really isn't ready to reveal what that is yet, he just kind of gives us a reminder in this chapter, saying like, just remember that Luffy is an ally of the Mink tribe and the Kozuki clan as well, just like Joy Boy was hundreds and hundreds of years ago during the Void Century. And it's also worth noting that both Zou and Wano, where the Minks and Kozuki clan are from, are both countries that are technically isolated and cut off from the rest of the world. But more on that later. I kind of get the impression that this chapter was sort of a compass that Oda decided to give us. It's kind of like him saying, look, these are the things that I want you to pay attention to, because they're going to pay off by the end. And so once we get to the end or near it, I think we're going to look back on this chapter and be like, well, wow, like there was so much foreshadowing to the ending in chapter 1000. I think we're going to find out what Marco's devil fruit weakness is very soon, because if you notice in the last chapter, like attacks were passing right through him and stuff, and he just kept on flying. But in this chapter, like in order to grab King and Queen like that, he has to become tangible. And we even see Queen questioning how it is that Marco's devil fruit power actually works, and so I feel like this would be a great opportunity for Oda to expand on that. And speaking of explaining things, what is up with Queen's neck? Like, Seeing his neck move like this in this chapter definitely got me to think that this was something that was done to him. I mean, because if you're going to modify your neck for it to be able to do that, that's not something that a human being can do by themselves. Like, even by One Piece standards, it's still a bit strange because, like, for example, Frankie, like, he can repair himself and he can upgrade himself, but even he doesn't have an extendable neck like that. And so if Queen actually did that to himself, I think that would imply that he's a better mechanic than Frankie, which I don't believe. It's like Inspector Gadget, right? Inspector Gadget has an extendable neck, and he was in an accident and he got work done by other people to get his own upgrades. And so the whole thing is just giving me really, really strong Vegapunk vibes. Because if you look at the extendable neck, right, it kind of works the exact same way that Queen's arm works, where it seems as if the machine part of it bypasses or goes along with Queen's Double Fruit power. And so we know that Vegapunk discovered how Double Fruit power transmission works, to the point where he actually invented a way in which an object, an inanimate object, could consume or gain a Double Fruit power. That's why we have Mr. Four's gun, for example, that has a dog fruit power. So yeah, Queen being a cyborg and having his neck stretched that way definitely connects him to Vegapunk, and therefore Judge as well, which we already knew. However, this does make me appreciate Queen's Brachio Bomber attack a lot more, in terms of just how heavy it must be. Like, if most of his body is made out of metal, I mean, that hit is intense. Like, no wonder Big Mom regained her memories after that. But anyway, Marco just goes ahead and flings Zoro up onto the rooftop, which I do have to give credit to Marco because that's quite a throw. That's a long throw. If you look at that panel, they still weren't too close to the top. And so, yeah, props to Marco because, like, he throws Zoro quite a distance. Plus, he's also, like, gripping, handling two Yonko commanders at the same time. We then cut to Yamato and Momo to talk about Odins Journal, and in my opinion, that book should have #spoilers written on its cover. It's just a major book of spoilers, that's what it is. I think it's pretty obvious that it was Lady Toki, the one who saved the book from the fire, and what I think is even more interesting is that she essentially used the same technique that the archaeologists back in Ohara used to protect their books and their writings from the fire of the Buster Call. So if you remember, the archaeologists begin to throw away all of their books into a lake so that they don't burn. And we know that Toki lived during the Void Century, but that she had to leave, she had to jump in time because things were getting really bad back then. So she probably witnessed the world government firsthand trying to destroy a bunch of records and books and all these things, led by Imu and the Gorosei. And so she decided to throw the journal into the water, just like people did back during the Void Century. I'm not really sure if her Devil Fruit power allows her to make items travel through time. Like, she sends the scabbards into the future, and they all have their clothes with them, so, I mean, I guess. But then, like, if she had given them the journal to take with them into the future, then Kanjiro, being a traitor, like, if he had gotten his hands on that journal, it would have been problematic for the plot. Then we cut over to the Ace flashback, where Ace has accidentally let it slip what the ending of the series will be. And it sounds like I'm joking, but I'm really not. That's literally what he just said to Yamato. That's why he's like, oh no, I spoke too much. I just gave you a huge spoiler, Yamato. Even though technically Yamato already knew what the spoiler was because she read Odin's Journal. Now, the thing that Ace is talking about takes us back to chapter 585, which is the chapter where Ace, Sabo, and Luffy become brothers. And so in that chapter, each of the brothers declares what their dream is. Sabo says that he wants to set out to sea so that he can see the world and write a book about it. And he also wants to study navigation. So I definitely foresee a panel of him and Nami working together by the end of the series so that Nami can complete her map and Sabo can complete his book. Ace then says that he wants to become a famous pirate and that he'll never run away from a fight. But really what he really wanted was to find a reason for his life. Like, he always questioned whether or not he deserved to be born. And so I feel like little Ace just needed to watch Soul, because that's what the movie is about, essentially. Flowers don't question why they should be alive. Grass doesn't question why it keeps growing every time you cut it. It's just alive. So it doesn't matter if you can't figure things out or if you don't have all the answers. Nobody has that. It's just that existing is a gift. all by itself. After Ace comes Luffy, and he takes a deep breath and says, "I'm gonna become," and the scene cuts away, and we don't get to hear what he says. All we see is Ace and Sabo's reaction to what Luffy said. Now, that scene is pretty much identical to a scene that we get in chapter 966 with Roger, Odin, and Whitebeard. In that scene, Roger says, "I'm going to get to the final island. The world government doesn't want people to get there, and then I'll become," and it cuts off, and Whitebeard and Odin have the exact same reaction that Sabo and Ace have. Even the placing of the band-aids are exactly the same, which, by the way, those band-aids are also similar to the band-aids that Ace has in this chapter as well. So the million-dollar question here is, what did Luffy and Roger say? Because if you can figure that out, you can figure out what the One Piece is and what the ending of the series will look like. Now, at first, I think that the assumption that most of us had in regards to what Roger and Luffy had said was that they had just said, "I want to become the Pirate King," or "I'll become the Pirate King." Except now we know that that's not the case, that they said something else. Because in chapter 968, after Roger goes to Laugh Tale, Rayleigh is reading the newspaper and he tells Roger, "You know, Roger, they're calling you the Pirate King." And then Roger just kind of laughs at the headline and says, "Oh, well, it has a nice ring to it. That's a cool name, I guess." But he never says, "Oh, that's the thing that I've always wanted to become." He doesn't say that. The title of Pirate King came from the newspapers, right? Not from Roger himself. Roger wanted to become some other thing aside from the Pirate King. And Luffy wanted to become the exact same thing. In fact, I'm willing to bet that the reason for why Shanks gave Luffy Roger's hat in the first place was because Shanks heard Luffy say the exact same thing that Roger said. And we know this because back in Sabaody, Rayleigh has a flashback when he's thinking about Shanks, and Shanks tells him, "Rayleigh-san, I was really surprised. There was actually this little kid, this little boy back in the East Blue that said the exact same words that Roger said." So again, if you can figure out what it was that Luffy and Roger said in those missing panels, you'll be able to figure out what the One Piece looks like. Now, we already have some hints in terms of what they could have said. The first hint, which is repeated again in this chapter by Ace, is that whatever they said is normally or would be normally something that would make a person laugh. In the chapter where Luffy says it, Sabo laughs at it, and in the chapter where Roger says it, Whitebeard laughs at it. In fact, Whitebeard, after he hears what Roger says, Whitebeard asks Roger, like, "What are you, a little kid? Like, what are you, Roger, a little boy?" So it has to be something that at first appears a little bit childish on the surface, or a little bit naive, right? Something that like other people would kind of take as a joke. Like if you think about it from Luffy's perspective, Luffy kind of has the mentality of a child. So even back then, even as a little kid, you have to put yourself in his shoes. Like what would Luffy want? What would Luffy say? Coming from the mentality of a child. It has to be something genuine, something that, you know, I think as kids, like maybe we have like these really big dreams, but then as we grow up and become adults, we kind of let go of those dreams because we become more cynical. But Luffy and Roger didn't do that. In fact, it almost sounds as if Oda is saying, like, he's telling all of us as readers, refuse to become cynical. As another example, Luffy's birthday is actually Children's Day in Japan. So that's there for a reason. And by the way, this whole thing about it seeming kind of like a joke, like a childish wish, I think that's also what Joy Boy was all about, because what does Roger do when he finds the One Piece? He laughs. And not only does he laugh, but he says, "Man, like Joy Boy, I really wish that I could have lived in the same time period as you, you know, to have a conversation with you." So it kind of has like the same core value. So if we're just throwing out ideas, you know, just to see what would fit with what they said, we know how the sentence starts. The sentence starts, "I'll become blank," right? So to me, it could be something like, "I'll become like the world unifier," or "I'll become everybody's friend. I'll become the one who brings everybody together. I'll become the one who makes the world become one piece." Something like that. It definitely has to do with world peace, because that's one of the things that Oda thinks about a lot. But then also, like we talked about the Kozuki clan and the Minks, and how
those are isolated countries, right? And the whole point of Wano is to get Wano to open up its borders to the world, right? To unite itself with the rest of the world. So I kind of feel like it has to be something along those lines of bringing people together. Joy Boy left a message in Fishman Island because he couldn't fulfill the promise that he made to the Mermaid Princess. And so the assumption of a lot of people is that the promise that Joy Boy made was that he was going to take the Mermaid Princess and her people up to the surface, you know, in a period where like they wouldn't be discriminated against for being fishermen people or for being merfolk. And so, of course, he couldn't fulfill that promise. And of course, what does Luffy do? What does Luffy promise Shirahoshi? It's like he'll be the one to fulfill Joy Boy's promise. He'll be the one to take Shirahoshi up to the surface. So it definitely has something to do with uniting people and busting through barriers to bring people together. I think that's the essence of what the secret dream is going to be about. But let me know what you think.
Something that I really appreciated from this chapter is that we knew that Ace grew up resenting Roger, resenting his father, because a lot of people would blame Roger for the rising crime, this new age of piracy, right, that came after Roger's death. And so Ace would hear that and say, so if my father was this monster that people talk about, then what does that say about me? And so he was always kind of bitter about his dad being the Pirate King. And that was one of the things about Ace's character that was never addressed. Like, it was one of the things that Ace never got closure on. And in this chapter, Yamato tells him about, like, this guy. He doesn't say who, but this guy said the same thing that Luffy did. And then Ace says, oh, really? That's cool. I wish I could have a drink with that guy and with Luffy. And he doesn't know that that guy is his dad.
And so I feel like that was a good way of Oda beginning to heal that bitterness, that resentment that Ace grew up with in regards to his father. Because it's kind of like if Ace were saying, in another life, I would be open to meeting and drinking with somebody like my dad. I don't know why I've always had this idea of this scene in my mind where Luffy gets to Laugh Tale and there's going to be a monument built there for Roger and possibly Ace as well. And then, you know, sort of like Roger's spirit will be there. And it won't be forever, like it'll just be a temporary thing. But I do think that, you know, there's going to be a way, either through Brook's Awakening or through some other kind of device, where Luffy is going to meet Roger's spirit and possibly Ace. There will be like 3 cups of sake there so that they can have a conversation with each other. It'll be like a nice nostalgic moment by the end of the series. But yeah, I've always had this idea that at some point, Luffy was going to find a way of meeting Ace and Roger again, somehow. And I feel like Ace's comment in this chapter further solidified that idea. Maybe it's because of Harry Potter that I think that. Because that's what happens by the end. Harry gets to meet his parents as ghosts.
I'm trying to figure out what the point of the Vivy card scene was. Like, a part of me thinks that maybe it was just a nice way for us to learn how Ace got his, since we know that Vivy cards only exist in the New World. By the way, the dialogue that Yamato has while handing the card over is pretty much an exact copy of the dialogue that Ace has while giving his Vivy card to Luffy in Alabasta. So again, I'm not sure if the scene is supposed to be this wholesome way of tying up a loose end, or if it's supposed to foreshadow somebody giving a Vivy card to somebody else by the end of the arc. Anyway, Ace leaves, and we know the reason why he left was because he wanted to become stronger. He wanted him and his crew to become a greater pirate group. We cut to Luffy running up the stairs. He bashes open the door, and then we get this really cool double-page spread of the Supernova lined up against the Yonko. Now, what's very weird about that scene to me is that Zeus looks battle ready. Like, he's buffed up, you know, he's like smiling menacingly, like he's ready to go. But Prometheus, on the other hand, has shrunk, which is really strange because in the previous chapter he was puffed up, but now he's so tiny I didn't even notice him at first. And so I feel like Big Mom must have drained his energy or something. Like, she must have a plan. We know that Big Mom and Kaido were waiting for the Supernova to get up there with them anyway. So I feel like maybe she has an ace up her sleeve that involves an attack with Prometheus's fire. And speaking of hiding things, what happened to all the metallic junk that Kid was carrying up with him? Like, where did it go? I didn't see it in this chapter. And if he's hiding it for a reason, so it almost seems like he's going to be using that metal in a totally different way than he normally uses it.
Obviously, Oda hypes up the supernova in this chapter via Yamato's words. And I thought about it, I was like, what is it with the number 5? Because last week, chapter 999, Ace dropped 5 names, right? He talked about Cavendish, Capone, Kid, Law, and Luffy. And in this chapter, we get 5 supernova. It's Kid, Killer, Zoro, Law, and Luffy. So for this chapter, I did kind of think about, is there something special, specifically about these 5, that kind of sets them apart, or that would kind of set them apart from the rest of the supernova? And the only answer I could come up with is that these 5 supernova were the ones with like the purest intentions of wanting to take down Kaido from the start. Like, for example, Law was already targeting Kaido since Punk Hazard. He's the one who tells Luffy about that. Luffy makes this promise to Momonosuke in Zou about, wanting to take down Kaido. Zoro recently declared, like, I'm here to cut Kaido. And then Kid and Killer actually fought Kaido even after he fell from the sky on them. Kid and Killer were the only ones that didn't, change sides or pretended to be a beast pirate, right? So I feel like this is Oda's reward for just being genuine about their intentions of trying to take down Kaido. That said, though, I do kind of have a question here, because we do clearly see that the Scabbards have been knocked out. They can't fight anymore. And then Law switches them downstairs. I don't know where he sent them to. I don't know if he sent them to Chopper. Marco's down there too, but he's busy with 2 Yonko commanders. So, I'm assuming he sent them to Chopper. So my question is, since the Scabbards can no longer fight, they were defeated, Kaido defeated them, then who are we supposed to think are the 9 shadows of Toki's prophecy? Because Toki did prophesize, in 20 years, during a full moon night, 9 shadows will appear to bring the dawn, or something like that. And I was like, well, the 9 shadows, or at least the 9 shadows who I thought were supposed to be the 9 shadows, have been defeated by Kaido. So who are these new 9 shadows? Are they still the Scabbards? Are we supposed to believe that they'll be healed and they'll be back to fight? Or are these 9 shadows supposed to be referring to the supernova? And if that's the case, then who is the 9th shadow? Because even if you were to add up all of the supernova currently in Wano, that still only gives you 8. It doesn't give you 9. We have Luffy, Zoro, Kid, Killer, Law, Drake, Apu, and Hawkins. So unless somebody else joins, like Yamato, for example, you're still 1 person short. I made a video a while back about what each of the supernovas could do attack-wise to hurt Kaido. It got a lot of likes for some reason, so thank you for that. But out of the entire lineup of supernovas, the one that I really didn't know like what he could do against Kaido was Killer. I'm still kind of curious what Killer is going to be able to do against Kaido. Are we supposed to assume that Killer knows Rio and that's how he'll be able to hurt him? Anyway, Luffy just kind of walks past Yonko, Kaido, and Big Mom, and that looked really boss, just so much Pirate King energy coming out of that scene. But at the same time, I do wonder whether is it just something that he could do now, that he could just walk past these Yonko like without consequences, or was it something that Big Mom and Kaido sort of allowed him to do? Because we do know that Big Mom and Kaido are jerks, but especially when it comes to Kaido, I think that there's this curiosity about Luffy. Like he's kind of like eyeing him as like, I wonder how far I can push this guy. So Kaido's like, hey kid, tell that joke you told earlier. It was funny. So there's a part of Kaido that kind of finds Luffy amusing. And if you look at his opening move, it's not even a Thunder Bagua that he uses. It's just like a normal like, raw club. Just like a, normal swing. It was just a normal swing that missed. And the roof of Onigashima has already begun to crumble. So you can only imagine what's going to happen when Luffy and Kaido start getting serious. And I'm sure there's going to be a scene later down the road where Big Mom and Kaido recognize something in Luffy that reminds them of Roger.
We get a bunch of emotional flashbacks that, of course, serve to up the motivation for Luffy's punch in that scene. And before the punch connects, there's a panel of Kaido just looking up at Luffy, not even trying to guard or anything. Like, he's just, Just bring it, kid. Like, whatever. What do you got? Now, I guess a normal question here would be, why did Luffy start off the fight using Gear 3rd instead of going immediately into Gear 4th? Because we know that thanks to Luffy learning Rio and being able to learn how to redistribute his haki better, Gear 4th doesn't tax Luffy's body as much as it did back in Dressrosa. So why did he open up with Gear 3rd? Well, first of all, that's exactly the same way that Luffy decided to open up the fight with Kaido back in Kuri. Like, the Gear 3rd coming down from the sky, hitting Kaido in the skull, that's exactly the same way that the first encounter started. Another reason is that this is just how fights in Shonen typically work. In Dragon Ball Super, there's a scene where Goku begins to fight Jiren, but he starts it off in Super Saiyan, so Supreme Kai asks, why doesn't Goku just go Super Saiyan Blue right off the bat? And so Krillin explains, and by the way, Krillin and Luffy have the same voice actress, but Krillin explains that when it comes to top tier level fighters, what they start off doing is that they scale their opponents first. They get a read for their opponent's moves first, and then they gradually push out more power as it escalates, as it's needed. And since Kaido and Luffy are both brawlers, I'm pretty sure that that's the same dynamic that we're going to see evolve and be applied in this fight. Red Rock is essentially the Gear 3rd version of Red Hawk. I mean, the two names even rhyme with each other, so it's just a more improved, stronger, better version of the opener that Luffy used against Doflamingo, and I'm assuming there must also be a Red Hawk version for Gear 4th. Anyway, the rock, just like the hawk, is a bird. A rock is a large mythological bird that originated in the Middle East. That's where it was popularized. And I've actually seen some depictions of it as golden statues within Buddhism. And so that actually got me to think, you know how in the anime, Luffy's Rio aura at first was kind of reddish, but then the anime changed it to like yellowish gold? I'm kind of curious about whether Luffy's Gear 5th or his awakening is going to have something to do with the incorporation of that color. Because again, like the rock I've seen in golden statues, and then Hyogoro at one point, when he saw Luffy in Gear 4th, he said, oh, he kind of looks like the Mio, the Wisdom King. And those Wisdom Kings, they're Buddhist deities. And so of course we know that the color gold is used a lot in depictions within Buddhism. And so I kind of wonder if that color is going to have something to do with Luffy's awakening or Gear 5th.
There's this little movie / anime special called 3D2Y. And in the movie, by the end of it, we see Luffy use Red Hawk for the very first time, chronologically. And he's up against this guy called Brindy World or Brundy World. And the guy is just sort of mocking him. He's telling him, like, look at you can't protect anybody. You couldn't even save your brother. And then Luffy's like, you're right. I wasn't able to save Ace's life, but I still have Nakama that are waiting for me. And so the way that special shows the activation of Red Hawk for the very first time is that Luffy is thinking about his crew, and he's also thinking about his brother, which is kind of similar to what happens in this chapter, because in this chapter we get like a collage of little flashbacks pertaining to all of the characters from Wano. And then the chapter also focuses on Ace, which, you know, Red Hawk is supposed to be an homage, a reference to Ace. So in that sense, I think it's pretty fitting that Red Rock, which is one step above Red Hawk, kind of follows the same formula for its activation. Yamato even says it in this chapter, all these years I actually thought that it was going to be Ace, the one leading the charge. And Roger thought the same thing. Like, after he found the One Piece and he realized that him and his crew were too early, I think he turns to Rayleigh and he says, it'll be up to my son to do this. And so Ace is there in spirit, in a way, because, you know, he inspired Luffy's Red Rock. In addition, I guess this also means that Luffy found a way of combining the properties of his Gear 2nd with the properties of his Gear 3rd. Because what gives Red Hawk the fire, the flame, in the first place is the steam of Gear 2nd combined with armament hardening. But Gear 3rd by itself doesn't produce any heat. It doesn't produce any steam. So I'm guessing that what Luffy is doing is that he's applying the properties of his Gear 2nd into his Gear 3rd and then coating that with haki. And that's how we get this reaction. After taking the hits, Kaido seems okay to me. Like, his face is toasted, obviously, but it seems like he's getting right back up. You know, I remember when Luffy tried Red Hawk against Dofi, and Law made a comment about it being a superficial blow because Doflamingo was just too much of a tank. So, Kaido should be completely fine after this, but it was still a good opener for a whole bunch of other reasons. Now, when it comes to the chapter itself, I think one of the main questions that people have right now is, was this chapter overhyped? And was it overhyped? Absolutely. Absolutely. My feelings on the chapter is that I completely understand why this chapter ended up being what it was, which was a perfectly good, solid chapter of One Piece. And here's what I think, right? Here's my suspicion of what happened in regards to the production of this chapter. So, one thing that really caught my attention from Oda's Jump Festa statement was that he mentioned Demon Slayer. And we know that Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba, is a total phenomenon in Japan. It topped the charts when it comes to manga sales. The movie is breaking all types of records. And so for an author of an ongoing series, like Oda with One Piece, you always want to sell more. You always want to grow your audience. It doesn't matter how popular the series already is. You always want to get more fans invested in your story. I mean, you want to keep the fans that you already have happy, but you also want to get more fans. So from that perspective, from that marketing perspective, I think what happened was, this milestone of a chapter is coming up. It's chapter 1000. Let's make this something that not only the hardcore fans can understand and like, but let's make it something that could also draw in new readership. Let's do a little thought experiment. Pretend that you don't know anything about One Piece at all right? Pretend that you've never seen an episode or read a chapter of One Piece, but you're still an anime and manga fan, all right? If you're still an anime and manga fan, odds are you're probably going to run into some discussion or hear a mention about the fact that One Piece is going to hit chapter 1000 very soon. And so from that perspective, you might be curious enough to check out that chapter, even if you don't know anything about the series. So if this person that doesn't know anything about One Piece decides to pick up the magazine and read chapter 1000, what are they going to find? Well, in my opinion, they're going to find the best, probably the best sample, the best snapshot of what the series of One Piece is about. It's almost like it's self-sustained, right? This chapter has like the core character of Luffy, it has a bit of world building, it has action, and it has the essence, the core values of the series, which is friendship and trying to make the world a better place. So when someone who doesn't know anything about the series picks up this chapter out of curiosity, I think they're going to walk away with a perfectly good idea of what the series is about. In fact, I think like if somebody were to ask me, what is One Piece about? Like, what is it really about? I would probably hand them this chapter. So from that marketing perspective, I think this chapter works and I think it does the job that it's supposed to do perfectly. So that's from a new fans / marketing perspective. From a hardcore fans perspective, yes, I would have wanted more hype. I would have wanted more intensity, a bigger reveal perhaps. But what this chapter ended up doing is that it kind of ended up humbling me because it reminded me that no manga that gets to 1000 chapters gets there by hype alone, right? You don't get to 1000 chapters based off of big reveals, based off intensity, based on hype alone. You can't do that. It's not sustainable, right? What gets you to 1000 chapters is chapters like these. Consistency. Consistently delivering good quality chapters week after week. That's what gets you to 1000 chapters. The hype reveals, the plot twists, the intensity, that'll come and it'll go. But at the end of the day, this is the journey. And it's been a heck of a journey so far, guys. I remember the first time I ever heard about One Piece. I was at a bus stop because, throughout my college years, I couldn't afford a car, so I would take the bus. Which is fine, it's not that big of a deal. It's not that problematic. It really sucks though when the weather is bad, like when it's raining or when it's snowing. That's when it really sucks because you're just left waiting in the rain or in the snow. And in this particular occasion, it was really cold. It wasn't snowing, but it was really cold. And I was just there, and this guy from one of my classes was also taking the bus, and because his car was in the shop. and we started talking about, the TV shows that we liked, that we watched. I wasn't into anime back then. And he mentioned that he was going to the bookstore to read this story about a kid who had gotten a power from eating a fruit. He turned into rubber because he ate a fruit. And I was like, what? Like, what kind of fruit are we talking about here? Like, oranges, bananas? Like, what kind of fruit? And he's like, no. There's these special fruits. They're called devil fruits. And I was like, okay. Like, I tried to be nice at the time. But internally, I was like, that sounds so stupid. That's just ridiculous. Again, it was cold. So I was like, man, I don't want to be here. Like, I just want to leave. I remember it was like after a finals exam. So I took a final and I was there at the bus stop. And this guy was talking about One Piece, hyping it up. And I was just like, it wasn't something that I was interested in. Like, I kind of regretted starting the conversation with him in the first place. And the bus wouldn't show up. And I was like, I just want to go where I need to be. I want to get out of here. I don't even remember what I was going to do that day. All I remembered was that I was frustrated and angry because I was out in the cold and I didn't have a car. And it was after a final exam. And I thought to myself, what did I do that, I'm pretty sure I aced that final. What did I do that I don't get to go home like on a car like normal people? And so this guy kept talking about One Piece, and at that point, I had already checked out of the conversation, And the bus came eventually, and we parted ways. And I did not check out the series because at the time, I just felt like it was so dumb. Eventually, I got into Naruto, and because it's anime, people recommended me other things. And one of those things was One Piece, but I still rejected it. I still resisted it. And even my two best friends actually told me, one of them almost pretty much sat me down and said, no, this is good. This is actually really good. You should check it out. And still, I just, resented it and didn't check it out. Until one time, I didn't have anything to do. I was really bored. And I think it was on Hulu or something. And I was like, okay, what is this stupid thing that people won't shut up about? So I put on the first episode and it made me laugh. And me laughing back then was very rare. I was just so angry and just frustrated. I still kind of am, but less so. But yeah, I remember laughing and here I am. But when it comes down to it, it all goes back to that bus stop in the cold for me. And it's just so weird how life works, where it's like, I thought the bus was going to show up, to get me to where I wanted to be, to get me to where I thought I needed to be. And in fact, I was actually rejecting the thing that was actually going to get me to where I really needed to be. So with that said, I really hope that this brand new year gets you one step closer to where you really need to be. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and for watching my videos throughout all of 2020. You have no idea how much that means to me. Happy New Year. Take care. I'll catch you guys later. Bye.